So a few weeks ago, I posted a video where I outlined the toxic effects of a popular supplement known as Fedoja agrestis, where I briefly mentioned my top 3 alternatives that can be safely used to increase testosterone: Ashwagandha, Tongkat, and Shilajit. And then last week, I released another video on Ecdysteroids, and the overwhelming response to those 2 videos was, "Zach, how do we properly cycle these together?" And so that's what today's video is all about, guys: how to properly and safely cycle these together in order to maximize results and minimize the risk of side effects. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Hey guys, my name is Zach, and welcome to Nutrition Library, where we take an evidence-based approach to supplementation and nutrition. If you are new to the channel or you haven't already, do me a huge favor and hit the red subscribe button that's below this video so you can stay up to date with all of our future content. Thank you so much. Now, before we get into the specifics of my specific dosing protocol, I do think it would be extremely beneficial for us to get a general grasp of the mechanisms of action of all 4 of these compounds, so that you guys can kind of get a glimpse into my thinking process as to why I chose my specific dosing and cycling protocol. Now, when it comes to ashwagandha and testosterone, there are 3 primary mechanisms of action. One is that it decreases cortisol, which has an inverse relationship with testosterone. 2 is that it increases thyroid hormone, which is a direct stimulator of luteinizing hormone and subsequently testosterone production as well. And 3 is that it, interestingly enough, increases serotonin signaling. Now, the reason this is interesting is that when you increase serotonin signaling, typically this does one primary thing, which is increase prolactin levels, and prolactin actually typically suppresses the production of luteinizing hormone and testosterone. However, it has been shown in several clinical trials as well as rodent trials that ashwagandha actually has the opposite effect. And so if you dig a little bit further into the research, what you'll notice is that the suppressive effects of serotonin on luteinizing hormone and testosterone are actually mediated through a very specific serotonin receptor known as the 5-HT1A receptor. And what's interesting is that ashwagandha seems to downregulate this receptor, and is actually one of the ways that ashwagandha increases luteinizing hormone and testosterone. But what's more is that ashwagandha also seems to improve the signaling of another serotonin receptor known as the 5-HT2A receptor, which actually has the opposite effect of the 5-HT1A receptor. When the 5-HT2A receptor specifically is stimulated, it actually suppresses prolactin release and increases luteinizing hormone and testosterone production. Now, this is fantastic for testosterone production, but this is also where we tend to run into some of the side effects of ashwagandha if taken for too long or in too high of a dosage. And the reason for this is that the 5-HT2A receptor is extremely inhibitory to neurological function. And because ashwagandha also has some other inhibitory actions from reducing cortisol levels as well as improving GABA signaling, again, if ashwagandha is taken for too long of a period or in too high of a dosage, there's always the risk of running into what I call the gray effect. And this is just simply where nothing really is exciting, but nothing's really depressing as well. And so everything is just, well, gray. And this is why proper cycling and proper dosage is just so important with ashwagandha. However, it is really important to note here that it usually does take several months for these side effects to work themselves out. However, some people do tend and do appear to be somewhat more sensitive to these side effects. Now, when it comes to Tongkat, the primary mechanisms here seem to be: 1, the possible upregulation of the enzymes that are needed to produce testosterone. 2 is that it also seems to antagonize the alpha subset of estrogen receptors. And when estrogen binds to these receptors in the brain, it usually suppresses testosterone production, and Tongkat can prevent this from happening. And the third mechanism of action here seems to be the dopaminergic effects of Tongkat. The more dopamine you have in your central nervous system means that there's less prolactin released, more luteinizing released, and subsequently more testosterone as well. Now, it has been wrongly stated that Tongkat primary mechanism of action here is the reduction of sex hormone binding globulin. However, This just isn't anywhere in the literature whatsoever, and so I'm not really sure where this rumor started, but it is fairly safe to say that this is not a mechanism of action here. Now, the main reason that Tongkat Ali needs to be cycled is because of its potent effects on antagonizing the alpha subset of estrogen receptors. If taken for too long or in too high of a dosage, there does tend to be somewhat of a suppressive effect on bone health, joint health, and heart health as well. Now, when it comes to Shilajit, the main mechanism of action here seems to be one, that it increases testicular antioxidant capacity, two, is that it increases mineral content in the testes, and three, is that it also appears that the fatty acid content seems to confer some protective effects on the testes as well. Now, because of the very specific mechanisms of action here, Shilajit is actually one of the compounds that I really don't think needs to be cycled, which is why Shilajit's actually one of the few compounds that I take every day. Now, Shilajit also seems to increase GABA levels as well as dopamine levels, which also contribute to its mood and cognitive enhancing effects, as well as its hormone regulatory properties. However, because this is presumably happening because of nutrient replenishment in the body, again, I really don't think Shilajit is a compound that needs to be cycled. Now, when it comes to ecdysteroids, the main thing to understand here is that they don't have a major effect on hormone levels. They actually act through binding to the beta subset of estrogen receptors to initiate muscle protein synthesis. Now, because ecdysteroids technically can be considered a phytoestrogen and work through phytoestrogenic mechanisms in the body, I would also consider ecdysteroids more of a food product, kind of like Shilajit as well. And because of this, I really don't think things like turkesterone and ecdysteroids absolutely need to be cycled at all. Now, I do think it is worth pointing out here that there does seem to be some type of interaction between Tongkat Ali and ecdysteroids, because Tongkat Ali does potently block both of the estrogen receptors. It does seem to negate and antagonize the effects of ecdysteroids in the body. And because of this, Tongkat Ali and ecdysteroids don't really stack well together, and again is where cycling and timing becomes so important. Now, with all of that being said, let's go ahead and jump into my personal dosing protocol. Now, this is my personal dosing protocol, and this is not a specific recommendation to any of you guys. However, I do think the most important thing to note here is that I do take Shilajit and ecdysteroids every single day in the morning with breakfast. And the main reason that I take these in the morning is because I find Shilajit to be somewhat stimulatory, and so I don't want to take it too close to bedtime and disrupt my sleep patterns. And I take ecdysteroids in the morning because I'm trying to space out my intake of ecdysteroids and Tongkat Ali as much as possible. Now, the second thing to note here is that I exclusively take Tongkat Ali and Ashwagandha only on workout days. And typically I'll just take them with my pre-workout concoction, which I'll probably make a video on here in the future. However, I do try to kind of like play around with it sometimes, and sometimes I'll kind of split my dosage apart and take some of it before my workout and some of it after my workout. Now, because I only work out 3 times per week, this ensures that I'm not overusing these herbs and helps me to kind of keep track of my use of them and ensure that I'm not going to run into any side effects. Now, it is also important to note here that I do tend to work out in the late afternoon to evening time, and so again, that's the reason that I'm taking ecdysteroids in the morning and then Tongkat Ali before my workout. There's usually roughly a 12-hour gap there, and seems from my experience to allow both of the benefits of ecdysteroids to happen, as well as also getting the benefits from the Tongkat Ali as well. Now, if you are someone who exercises in the morning time, these same principles can be applied to your workout schedule as well. However, you are going to have to kind of play around with what you like best in the morning versus the evening time. Now, one of the difficult things here is that because everyone's biology is so different, just depending on your exercise protocols and your genetics, as well as just other environmental factors, there is some wiggle room here as to what will work best for you personally. Now, another thing to note here is that there really isn't any hard science here, and so my recommendation to you guys is just experiment with these compounds, figure out what works best for you. It is worth noting here as well that works best right now may not work best in 6 months from now, and so continuing to play around with your dosing and your timing and your cycling of all of these is really important, and really helps to teach you to stay in tune with your body and how your body is reacting to specific compounds and exercise protocols, as well as diet. And so I say all that to say that that, it's okay to experiment with these things. Just have fun with it and see what works. Now, if you guys are new to this conversation on natural hormone optimization, I would highly recommend go ahead and getting a at-home blood test to test your personal hormone profile. Everyone is at a completely different place when it comes to their hormone profile, and so being able to implement a strategy that is geared towards your personal profile is extremely important. So if you guys are interested in this, there is a link in the description where you guys can find the absolute best hormone test on the market. But other than that, guys, if y'all haven't downloaded any of the supplement guides that I've got on my website, there's also going to be a link in the description to that. But other than that, I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much.